Is Stoicism holding you back? Let me ask this question in a different way. Has anything great ever been achieved through Stoicism? Has Stoicism inspired great art or great architecture? Has it fueled great warriors? Has it fired passionate love? Stoicism is the internet's favorite philosophy, and let's see if it lives up to the hype. Most people don't know this, but Stoicism shouldn't be considered a philosophy, but more so a strategy. And if you don't understand the difference between the two, then Stoicism can actually hold you back from your true potential. Stoicism in its purest essence is if you can do something about it, then go right ahead. If you cannot do something about it, then you have to accept it and move on. This can be expressed in the form of a prayer. Give me the courage to control that which I can. Give me the strength to accept that which I cannot. And give me the knowledge to tell the difference. This shows the greatest strengths of Stoicism, its simplicity, but also its greatest weakness. The flaw in Stoicism lies at the third sentence. Give me the knowledge to tell the difference. I think this is where Stoicism really falls short. And I'll explain by looking at the history, not just of Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, but also of Lucius Aurelian, the restorer of the world. Everybody on this side of the internet knows the name of Marcus Aurelius, the great emperor of Rome who ruled with justice, honor, and duty around 200 AD. We're aware of the book Meditations, which is his personal diary, which serves as the gateway book into Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius can be considered the true embodiment of the Greek ideal of the philosopher king. When I was in Rome last year, I was walking around in the city and I saw this massive marble column. There was no crowd around it, there was no hype around it, there was no information panels around it. And even tourists didn't really bother taking pictures of it. But I knew what it was. It was the column of Marcus Aurelius. It shows in its carvings the many battlefield triumphs of Marcus. Marcus had to fight brutal wars against the Germanics in the north, the Parthians to the east, and of course, he had to face the Antonine Plague. This plague did more damage to the Roman army and the economy than any enemy. On top of this, Marcus was in constant personal pain. He was not a very healthy man. He had some kind of a chronic illness, or perhaps it was just the stress of his duties as the emperor. Soon after Marcus Aurelius died, the empire started to crumble. There were 40 emperors in just the next 100 years, and we got a new emperor every 2 years. In contrast, Marcus ruled for 20 continuous years. After Marcus, we had Commodus, Marcus's fucked up son, who was so messed up in the head that he literally did this. He rounded up some guys who were handicapped, so people who had lost their legs, and he put them in snake costumes, and he made them wriggle around, and then he proceeded to beat the shit out of them with a club. Yeah, so messed in the head. Then we had Caracalla, who was a great soldier, but he did a lot of damage to Rome by debasing the currency and giving all the gold to the generals. Then we had Elagabalus, who literally was a prostitute. He literally prostituted himself to his guards and his soldiers. He even got the doctors to give him a sex change operation, which they refused to do. But still, this was the kind of Rome that it became after the reign of Marcus. And this is why Marcus is remembered with a lot of respect, because in his reign, things were actually pretty good. But now, the currency was worthless, the military was weak and demoralized, people had lost any trust in the government, and the religion was corrupted. And this was the empire that Lucius Aurelian took control of about 100 years after the death of Marcus Aurelius. This was an empire of degeneracy, decay, and corruption. The people of Rome were driven mad by drinking water from lead pipes. Rampant, uncontrolled immigration meant that the original Roman stock was being replaced, and global cooling was happening that was destroying grain and food production. On top of this, new rival powers were getting stronger. We had the Palmyrene Empire to the east, led by Zenobia, who was apparently a certified hottie, according to the historical record. And we have the new threats in the north, the Goths and the Vandals. In the west, we had the Gallic tribes. Today, we talk about the decline of the US, and we talk about inflation eating our savings. We're talking about China getting stronger and stronger. We talk about all this stuff. But it's all happened once before, and much worse. This was the empire that Lucius took control of. And yet, Lucius was able to bring the empire back to its former glory in just 4 years. So who was this Lucian Aurelian, and why am I hyping him up? Let's look at his origin story. Lucius was not born into power. He was not in line to the throne by a long shot. He was a regular enlisted soldier who was so damn good at his job that he rose up the ranks and eventually became a general, then the emperor himself. This should have been impossible. A rational man couldn't have done it. But Lucius was not a rational man. A rational man controls that which he can and accepts that which he cannot. A rational man would have looked at the state of the Roman Empire in 270 AD and decided that this dumpster fire could not possibly be controlled. This was a fallen empire. And just 10 years ago, Emperor Valerian was captured by the Persians. Imagine how fucked up that situation is. That's as though the president of the United States get captured by China. Like, that's an unbelievable thing. But that is what happened to Rome. Emperor Valerian was captured by the Persians, tortured, made into a footstool, and skinned alive according to some references. The rational man would have taken the path of Stoicism. The best I can do is slow the decline and push back the end times. But there's a thing. Lucius was not the rational man. He said, fuck it, we ball. And he did ball. In 4 years, he managed to undo about 100 years of corruption, military defeat, and stagnation. That's the mindset of a winner. Now let me make sure you understand the greatness of this man. He destroyed the Alemanni, the Goths, the Vandals, and the Sarmatians and the Jutungi in the north. Then he took all his forces to the east, crushed Zenobia and the Palmyrines, and then he went to the Gallic Empire in the west. Somewhere along all this, he also commissioned the building of the Aurelian walls around Rome that still stand today. He even fixed the currency system and reversed inflation by moving back to the true gold standard. Imagine the balls it takes to do that. And all of this was possible because he was completely consumed by the vital energy. This was a man who ran on electricity. This was the man against time, able to harness the destructive power of the Roman cavalry charge, but also the creative power of the Roman industry. And he couldn't have done this if he was a Stoic. And now you think I'm going to be misrepresenting Stoicism because I don't understand it. Well, let's see. Let's paint the best picture of Stoicism that we can. Stoicism is the wisdom to know that there are things outside one's control. In Marcus Aurelius' meditation, he talks about the only thing you can really control is the internal. You can only control the self and this idea of virtus, or virtue as we would call it. His idea was, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is being a virtuous man, doing the right thing no matter what the pressure or the temptations. To put it simply, Stoicism says control that which you can, but have the strength to accept that which you cannot. However, to do this, you need the knowledge to know the difference. The thing is, you don't have that knowledge. And this is the main flaw of Stoicism. You don't know what's within your control. If Lucius Aurelian looked at the hard facts, the evidence, and the rational arguments, he would have concluded that the Roman Empire was beyond doomed. He would have resorted to a defensive mindset, and that is exactly what Stoicism is. It is a defensive mindset. It was because Lucius took the offensive that he was successful. It is because he had irrational faith rather than cold logic that he could do the impossible. Even today, Elon Musk, is he a Stoic? Absolutely not. I just finished reading his book, his new biography by Walter Isaacson, and I am blown away by the impossibility of Musk's achievement. If Musk looked at the world as a cold and logical place, if he looked at it, in fact, as an engineer, then he would not have been able to build SpaceX or Tesla, let alone both at the same time. Stoicism as a life philosophy cannot lead to great success. Stoicism is focused on the internal, not the external. This is literally the core tenet of Stoicism put forward by Zeno himself. But here's the thing. Focusing on the internal does not drive change. Blind faith, irrational optimism, and pure passion are what drive change. Let me explain this in a slightly different way. If you're learning boxing and you're getting really good at defense, in the ring you have your chin down, you have your elbows up because you obviously don't want to get clocked in the face. And to be fair, this strategy works. You minimize the damage, but you will never win. With a pure defense strategy, you will never win. In order to throw a punch, you have to put down your defense for a second and risk getting punched in the process. Stoicism is a shield. Everybody has times in their life where they think things are hopeless. They say, when it rains, it pours. And I get it. Sometimes all you can do is stand and take the punches. Sometimes all you can do is just use the mental shield of Stoicism and say, this is just outside my control. I'll just accept it for what it is and do my duty. And my point isn't that Stoicism is bad or useless. Far from it. It's highly useful. My point is simply that it is one strategy, a defensive strategy that makes sense in special circumstances while things are genuinely outside your control. One example is just death. People die. Family members die. Friends die. Pets die. And there's nothing you can do after somebody is dead. There is no hope in this case. There is only acceptance. Another example is the things in the past. You cannot change the past no matter how powerful you are. It is truly outside our control. Faith and hope cannot change it. The only way forward is acceptance. But other than the past and death, there's a lot that is within our control. It is better to assume that things are within our control. We as humans have a bias towards the status quo. We are not risk-seeking creatures. So we must actively seek to push ourselves into thinking that we have more control than what our logical brain tells us. So I am not willing to stoically accept the world in which I am born into. So let me drive passionately towards the future that I want. Let me feel the pain of existence as a gift. He who can experience the deepest sorrow can rise to the greatest heights. I know I'm going to get a lot of comments saying, well, Stoicism doesn't tell you to be passive. And that's technically true. But Stoicism doesn't get you fired up. It doesn't have any aggression within it. Stoicism is a defensive mindset. That's just the truth of it. And even if you read the original works of Epictetus, it is a defensive mindset. It doesn't have fire within it. And it made sense for the Greeks and the Romans because those men had so much fire within them that you kind of needed something to place a damper on it to kind of control it. Our men, our modern world does not have men of great fire. It's quite the opposite. We're just normally passive. So we need the opposite. We need the fire. We need a worldview that actively rages against passivity. And Stoicism simply does not do that. Even now you might think that I don't fully understand Stoicism, and so I criticize it. But I do understand it. My point isn't that Stoicism has some logical flaw. In fact, it doesn't have a logical flaw. It's actually the perfect philosophy. And therein lies the problem. The human mind is not a computer. If the human mind could process if-then statements, if the human mind was a perfectly logical machine, then Stoicism would be the ideal operating system. If humans had perfect knowledge of our own capabilities and the full knowledge of the externalities, then Stoicism would be the perfect algorithm. But that is simply not the case. Stoicism should be used as a last resort strategy when everything is going bad. Too many young men snuff out the fire within them because they think it is virtuous to bear the burdens placed upon them. I know the ideas which I'm sharing in this video kind of go against the common wisdom of the masculinity space, but the history of philosophy actually supports my view. Roman Stoicism gained strength when the empire had crossed its peak was in a time of decline. It would be historically accurate to say that Roman Stoicism was born in an era not of hope and growth, but of stagnation and decline. Also, Stoicism works best in a society that tells you exactly what your duty is. Because if your duty is set in stone, you might as well deal with it the best you can. In Roman times, if you were the son of a baker, then you would learn how to bake. If you were the son of a cobbler, you would know how to make shoes. If you're born a slave, then tough luck. You might as well get used to it because you're going to die a slave. You could see here how Stoicism would be an amazing philosophy for the time. When you really cannot do much about your surroundings or your circumstances, Stoicism is the best. But here's the thing, Stoicism teaches you how to bear heavy loads, but does not teach you what loads to bear. Now coming back to the initial question, is Stoicism cope? Again, we look at history. Epictetus was a slave. He had zero control over his life and he needed a cope. Seneca was not technically a slave, but he was in the court of Nero, so he was a subject of the random whims of a madman. He had zero control over his life. He was exiled at random by Nero. He was executed at random by Nero. He needed a cope. But what about Marcus Aurelius? He was an emperor of Rome. Surely he is the opposite of a slave. Well, not so. Marcus Aurelius was a slave to his position. He couldn't quit. He couldn't even take a break. 20 years of relentless work, man. Not a single weekend, right? Every second of every day was devoted to legal procedures, endless warfare, plagues, civil wars, and famines. He did not have freedom. Now, it seems that I'm being critical of Marcus in this video, but nothing could be further from the truth. The strain and the stress that Marcus Aurelius faced would have broken any man. And if you look at the successors of Marcus, you have the proof. Commodus was a lunatic, Caracalla was a sadist, Elagabalus wanted a sex change operation. So the fact that Marcus could bear the burden of office is an impressive feat. But let's be clear, Marcus Aurelius lived his entire life on the defense. He didn't have a choice. His health was poor and his empire was crumbling. The main point is you do have a choice. You are not an emperor of Rome. You don't have to bear the responsibilities of being an emperor. You don't have to worry about making decisions that cost millions of lives. You don't have to live on the defensive as Marcus did. It is my personal belief that Marcus Aurelius, had he had better health, would have not taken Stoicism up, and he would have been less like Seneca and more like Caesar. He clearly had the ability, but he didn't have the mindset, and the reason he didn't have the mindset is because he didn't have the health. That's why I keep telling you, health comes first. And that includes mental health. You probably heard of meditation before or even tried it. Maybe you saw results and maybe you didn't. I have a unique meditation style that nobody on YouTube has talked about. This is the esoteric meditation protocol. One of the principles of esoteric health is that the body and the mind are one, and it is meaningless to train one without the other. Based on this principle, I've created this protocol, which I've been using for years at this point. The standard meditation and advice of sitting around focusing on breath takes too long to see results, and that's why you quit, because you don't see results quick enough. But I have fixed this problem. I will teach this meditation technique in the next video, so if you'd like to subscribe, you do have that option. In fact, I have created a whole community called the 30-Day Brain Reset. It contains a 30-day long course, a day-by-day training to reset your brain. This is the technique that allowed me to gain traction in life for the first time. It allowed me to break through my addictions, helped me get better social skills, made me a better decision maker, and even gave me the skill at sports and exercise and boxing. It's a very strange meditation technique, and you'll understand what I mean when I actually talk about it more. If you like the idea of being able to reset your brain for less than 10 minutes per day, then there's a link in the description below which is going to take you to that community. Right now it's practically free, so best time to get it is literally today. Coming back to the history of Stoicism, the word Stoicism comes from the word stoa, which were these corridors in Greece where philosophers will meet and share ideas. But where does the word stoa comes from? It comes from the Proto-Indo-European root sta, which means firm. But it is this same root that gives us the word stasis, which means to never change, to stagnate. And so we come to another flaw with Stoicism, which nobody really talks about. The common wisdom is that emotions are bad. Men should be not emotional. Men should be rational and logical and indeed stoic. But does this describe the greatest men of history? Napoleon, Alexander, Ashoka, Caesar, Shivaji, Aurelian, Justinian, and even in modern times, Washington, Hamilton, and even today, Elon Musk. None of these men were particularly stoic. They were moved by their titanic emotional energy. It was the power of their emotions that allowed them to lead their men in the first place. They acted on their emotions and were driven by their emotions. They made terrible mistakes also because of their emotions. The very forces that made them a great man also were in some cases their downfall. And here's where the virtue of Stoicism lies. Stoicism cannot drive a man forward, but it can stop a man from slipping backwards. Sometimes stasis is not a bad thing. It matters where you are. If you're happy where you are, then Stoicism is the perfect mindset. But for me, I want to shake things up. I want to see what can drive a man forwards. And I think the best answer is faith. Just as Stoicism is the shield that protects you, faith is the sword that strikes out. This can be faith in God, but it can also be faith in one's own ability. It can be faith in the possibility of a greater future. And this is what I believe in.